Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 1992 Founders Day Convocation and Awards Ceremony. We're so very pleased that you have attended this, and we hope that you will enjoy it. It's my pleasure now to introduce to you Dr. John Burgess and the MSU Brass Choir. Dr. Burgess is an assistant professor of music, and he will be conducting this very outstanding brass choir. They're going to lead us in the singing of the alma mater, for which I would like to ask you to stand. Afterwards, you may be seated for the continuation of some special music honoring the Kentucky Bicentennial. If you will now please stand for the singing and playing of the alma mater.
Resting in the day. One of the fondest memories that I have, several years ago in the 60s, three characters by the name of John Collis and Gene Duncan and Nelson Grody were watching a Reds baseball game in Cincinnati. And they played my old Kentucky home, and we stood as appropriate. And I looked to each side, and all three of us were crying. The interesting thing about that, of course, was Gene Duncan was from Alabama, and John Collis was from Ohio, and Nelson Grody was from Illinois. But it is a beautiful selection that means a lot to all of us. We want to thank John Burgess and the brass choir. I'm always pleased to put them on stage or to have a group from the music department to perform at every ceremony, any ceremony, because you can always expect a first-class presentation, and you did that again today, and we thank you. We're pleased, of course, to have each of you here, and I welcome you to join us as we celebrate our 70th birthday as a state university of higher education and the 105th year of higher education on this campus since the founding of the Morehead Normal School in 1887. It's my pleasure at this time to recognize some special guests. And if you will permit me to do so, I will try to do them in groups and then ask you to greet them accordingly. I believe we have two of our regents here today, one on the stage and one in the audience, and there may be others that will join us as the day progresses. Dr. Alvin Wheeler, if you will stand, will be introduced more fully later, representing the faculty as a member of our regents, and Mr. Tim Francis in the audience representing the student body. Will you greet our representatives from the regents? Here in support of our Founders Day Award recipient are her husband, Dr. James Powell, a former dean at Morehead State University, a former colleague of mine, and her son and daughter-in-law, Denny and Helen Northcutt. Would you greet Mary's special guests? One of the highlights of Founders Day each year is the presentation of the University Service Award. As I sat in my chair late last night and reread the list that's printed on your program, I realized that I have had the privilege of knowing every one of them but one very, very well. In fact, many of them we consider our very special friends. What an honor that is to have known almost each one of those that have been so recognized. And we're pleased today to have three previous, perhaps four previous recipients and family members representing two others here today. And would you please hold your applause until I have introduced either the recipient and or the people representing a recipient, and then you may greet them appropriately. Our 1982 recipient, Dr. Ted Crosswaite. Stand up, if you will, in the middle of the room. The 1983 recipient, Mr. Monroe Wicker. Monroe. Our 1989 recipient, Mr. John Collis. And from last year, Dr. Roscoe Playforth. And then representing the 1979 recipient, the late Linus Fair, are two of his daughters, Mrs. Nell Mahaney of our math faculty and Mrs. Merle Allen of the Round County Senior High School. And then here today, and I believe he just arrived, and I haven't had a chance to say good morning, but I will do so shortly, Preston. But here to represent the 1988 winner, the late George T. Young, is his brother, Mr. E. Preston Young of Louisville. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's once again express to these people how much we appreciate what they have meant to this great university over the years. And may I present my wife and partner and my bride of 43 years, Wilma, and the families and guests of the platform party. Wilma, will you and Betty and others and Jim, whoever, please stand and be recognized. This morning at our breakfast for retirees, they gave Wilma the privilege, I guess it was a privilege, to present me with my new retirement pin, and gave me the opportunity to present her retirement pin. So we are now properly attired, along with many of you in the audience, and we greatly appreciate that. Now I hear that there's some kind of a postal slogan that, you know, the mail is delivered regardless rain, sleet, hail, or snow, and yesterday and I guess today are good examples of that. And is there something to be delivered on a day that's once again supposed to snow? And is there something back in the back of the room that somebody that's supposed to present something or do something? If there is, will you please come forward? Oh my goodness. Talk about an oversized envelope. I'd say that'll cost somebody a pretty penny. That probably exceeds the normal dimensions of a birthday card.
I would like to present to everyone on behalf of the Morehead State Student Alumni Ambassadors and the Alumni Association this birthday card to Morehead State University for its 70th birthday.
To make this card complete, we have one more signature. President Grady, will you do the honors, please?
I will do. We appreciate so much the work of the Student Alumni Ambassadors. They do so many things for us all year long, and to make our Founders Day a very special day with with a card signed by hundreds, perhaps thousands of students, we want to thank you very, very much. There are a number of us in the audience and on the platform that would like to make this presentation to Mary Powell. I deliberated as to whether I was going to do it myself, selfishly, or to ask one of the members of the Board of Regents to do it. I decided that it should be done by the Board of Regents, and particularly by one regent, since he also has served with distinction as a member of the faculty. So I've asked Dr. Alvin Wheeler to represent the Board of Regents for this special presentation. Dr. Alvin Wheeler was elected to the board in 1987 and re-elected again in 1990. He is the 5th faculty member to serve as a regent since the seat was created by the legislature in 1968. A member of our faculty since 1972, he holds degrees from Mississippi College and Mississippi State University and is a professor of sociology and a former dean. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Alvin Wheeler.
I am especially pleased and honored today to represent the university's Board of Regents in presenting what has become one of the most significant symbols of recognition associated with this university. Since its inception by the board in 1978, the Founders Day Award for University Service has been presented to 14 outstanding people who gave greatly of themselves to Morehead State University over a prolonged period of time. That tradition of honoring those who have honored the university continues today as we salute a woman whose heart, mind, and body have served MSU for 37 years. Dr. Mary Northcutt Powell, Professor Emeritus of Education, began her professional association with Morehead State University in 1955, and her record of service has been unbroken since that time. Your printed program has many of the details of her professional achievements and her efforts to develop outstanding teacher education programs at the elementary and preschool levels. Literally thousands of public school teachers have been graduated from this university and gone into the classroom with confidence and skill because of the influence of Mary Northcutt Powell. She has continued to serve the university and our community as a volunteer in several organizations, and recently was recognized by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools for her pioneering work in elementary school accreditation. She is an authority in such matters and often serves as a consultant to public schools in accreditation matters. On behalf of the Board of Regents and all others who love and respect Morehead State University, it is my privilege to present the 1992 Founders Day Award for University Service to Dr. Mary Northcutt Powell.
I just hope that Dr. Wheeler saves that for my obituary. President Grody and Dr. Philly, Dr. Wheeler, and Dr. Kleber, and colleagues and friends, I am indeed pleased and proud and honored to receive this award from Morehead State University. And I would like to symbolically share it with so many, many people who over the years have offered me support and encouragement. One of the longest supporters I guess I had was Dr. Dorn and Mrs. Dorn, because I served with them through his entire term of presidency at the institution. I also thank my long-suffering family for their emotional support. Thank you. During my years of tenure, I have often felt and been grateful for the sense of nurturing and friendliness that I found with the institution. Following the climate that was started by the Dorans, continued by the Albrights, Dr. and Mrs. Grody have again brought this spirit, original spirit, back to the campus. Now, whether in the classroom at Breck teaching second graders, or in the School of Education with graduate and undergraduate students, or on state, regional, national committees working on educational programs, I have always felt with a sense of pride that I could say, yes, I'm from Morehead. I represent Morehead State University. Thank you again, and you can be sure this day will be cherished in my memory.
Mary, the Dorans wrote just a day or so ago and expressed their regret that they could not be here. Dr. Doran continues to be very active and very busy, and they happen to have had a series of seminars scheduled today, of which he simply was obligated to attend, or they would have been here to share this special moment with all of us. This year marks the 200th anniversary of Kentucky's admission into the Union, and we are pleased to join with other Kentuckians in celebrating the bicentennial of the Commonwealth. I'm proud to tell you today that Morehead State University can claim a contribution to this great celebration that is unmatched by any other college or university in the state. We were honored, indeed we were pleased, when the Kentucky Bicentennial Commission asked if we could loan them one of our top faculty members. The commission had decided that the highlight of the state's 200th year would be a great book of facts about Kentucky, and that Dr. John Kleber, professor of history at Morehead State University, was the man to serve as editor of that Kentucky encyclopedia. He earlier distinguished himself as a scholar with his work on the official papers of Governor Lawrence Weatherby. Today, 3 years later, the work is finished, and Professor Kleber has returned to MSU. I was pleased when the Founders Day Committee suggested that the most appropriate way to open the bicentennial would be to recognize the man who has managed the most significant part of the official celebration. He is a graduate of Bellarmine and the University of Kentucky, and we are proud to have him on our faculty. Please welcome our featured speaker, Professor John Kleber.
Thank you, Dr. Grody. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On Wednesday, I celebrated a birthday. The years have accumulated to the point where I must use the word in a very facetious manner, that is, the word celebrate. Aside from my own personal woes, this is an auspicious time for celebrations. In the course of a century, no year plays a larger role in the recognition of events past than does 92. This year, we mark the anniversaries of the discovery of the Americas, as well as the creation of Kentucky statehood. Such momentous events make it particularly appropriate that we take time today to recognize the founding of Morehead State University and to view it in the context of this quincentenary year of discovery and bicentenary year of statehood. The year 1992 should be a celebration of more than the founding of places. It is a celebration of people as well, for the two are intrinsically connected. Some of you may be familiar with a recent book on our county entitled Rowan's Progress. It graphically illustrates how certain individuals can change things. From time to time, uncommon people come along to accomplish great feats, and after they have passed, nothing is quite the same. This year, we recognize Christopher Columbus as such a person. On August the 3rd of 1492, Columbus set sail upon the ocean sea from the Spanish port of Palos de la Frontera. For years, Columbus had struggled against conformity, apathy, and ignorance to have the opportunity to open a new trade route to the Orient. On Friday, October 12th, at daylight, he reached the islet of the Licuyas that was called Ganahani in the language of the natives. Soon they saw naked people, and the admiral went ashore in his armed longboat. Then Columbus broke out the royal banner and claimed the land for their most Catholic majesties, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile. On that day, Christopher Columbus was a discoverer. Certainly he was not the first person to land on these shores, for there already exist in ancient and old and very advanced civilizations. Nor was he even the first European to come here, that privilege probably going to the Vikings. But Columbus was the true discoverer because he made known to all of Europe, as well as Asia and Africa, the existence of a landmass inhabited by people he called Indians. Columbus was a founder as well as a discoverer. In 4 trips to the New World, he took the first steps to build a firm European presence by establishing settlements in the West Indies. For good or bad, the world, particularly the Americas, would never again be the same. Nearly 400 years after Columbus founded a European presence in America, Frank and Phoebe Buttons started their school that evolved into Morehead State University. The Buttons were those unique individuals who herald change. Like Columbus, they possessed the same missionary spirit and single-minded devotion to enterprise. Unlike Columbus, however, they knew exactly where they were going when they left their home in Illinois, and they knew exactly what to expect when they arrived here in Morehead. They arrived in 1887, the last year of the Great Rowan County War. Beginning in 1884, some 24 people were gunned down in the streets of our town in this blatant political vendetta. Not far from where we sit, the streets ran red with the blood of the Martin and Tolliver clans. Before the Buttons' arrival, conditions had become so intolerable that when the state militia failed to halt the carnage, the General Assembly considered the idea of disbanding the county. Recognizing a bad thing, none of the surrounding counties would consider annexing any part of Rowan. They wouldn't have anything to do with us. The solution, therefore, was to build a school that would mitigate the violence by teaching the Bible and providing Christian education to the children of the county. Frank and Phoebe came to build a school, and like Columbus, they forever altered the life of a particular place. James McConkie, in his book Rowan's Progress, relates that Ida Button, the daughter of Frank, spoke at the dedication of this auditorium, and I suspect that she spoke from this very stage. And she recalled the scene in Morehead when she was a small girl. She said this: "I can see students arriving on horseback or in wagon, with no advance registration, no money for tuition, but they had faith that here they could find an education for which they yearned." The accomplishments of the labors of the Buttons are visible around us, just as the results of Columbus can be seen in the European presence from the Beaufort Sea to Tierra del Fuego. 300 years after Columbus discovered America, and 95 years before the Buttons established the Morehead Normal School, Kentucky was admitted to the Union as the 15th of the United States. The road to statehood was not easy, just as it was not easy for the early Spanish colonists or for the Buttons. Nature and intrigue placed many obstacles in our path. The early development of Kentucky, as with any wilderness region, was determined by its geography. The Appalachian Mountains were a barrier to settlement here. It was nearly a century and a half after Virginia was established before an Englishman passed through the barrier. Dr. Thomas Walker came through Cumberland Gap in 1750 and picked up the warrior's path leading north to the Salt Licks and to abundant game. Renamed the Wilderness Road, it became a major highway into our state. The Ohio River was an equally important road to the west, and down it came surveyors staking out land claims at suitable sites along the way from the Big Sandy in the east to the falls in the west. Along this highway traveled Simon Kenton, Thomas Bullitt, the McAfee brothers, and James Harrod. In 1774, Harrod made the first permanent settlement near the Dix River and called it Harrodstown. Through the Gap came Daniel Boone, and under the auspices of the Transylvania Company, soon planted on the banks of the Kentucky River a second settlement. These men, like Columbus, were discoverers and founders who made known to those residing in the East the glories of the Kentucky country. Here soft zephyr gently breathe on sweets, and the inhaled air give a voluptuous glow of health and vigor that seems to ravish the senses. So wrote pioneer historian Gilbert Imlay. More poetic but no less romantic were the words of a Kentuckian who announced a new era for the state after separation from Virginia. Our soil so rich, our clime so pure, sweet asylum for rich and poor. Poor did I say? Recall the word. Here plenty spreads her generous board, but poverty must stay behind. No asylum with us she'll find. Avant, fell fiend, we know thee not. Thy memory must forever rot. Dame Nature by a kind behest forbade you ever here to rest. Inherent in these words is the same spirit of optimism that pervades the founding of the Americas and the Morehead State Normal School. The years of revolution were difficult ones for the Kentucky settlements. Attacks by the British and their Indian allies kept the frontier in turmoil and gave credence to a Cherokee warning that Kentucky would prove to be a dark and bloody ground. In time, the exploits of George Rogers Clark and Mad Anthony Wayne in the Northwest Territories would make settlements safe here. With independence won from Great Britain, Kentucky began its struggle for separation from Virginia. 8 years and 9 conventions were necessary to achieve separation from our mother state. But in 1790, Virginia gave her consent. In 1791, the United States Congress voted admission. And on June the 1st, 1792, Kentucky entered the Union as an equal political unit. 200 years later, we celebrate Kentucky, our past, our culture, our history. But it is more than that. It is a celebration of our people, their character, their strengths, their stories. It is a celebration of Kentucky, of the Kentucky of the present. The recognition that 200 years of history has brought us to a point where Kentucky is a unique and interesting place to live. It is a celebration of Kentucky's future, an opportunity to take the traditions, the character, spirit, heritage, and natural beauty and assets of the Commonwealth and build a foundation for a strong, vibrant, and vigorous state for years to come. To plan this celebration, former Governor Martha Lane Collins appointed a commission made up of 30 Kentuckians from across the state. They were given the responsibility for the direction and overall celebration. Early in its planning, the commission decided to make its primary project the compilation and publication of an encyclopedia. In this manner, a permanent reminder would be left to future generations of the bicentennial celebration. It was recognized that most of the activities would be transitory in nature, but this would be different. Encyclopedias never disappear. And I think of one that should disappear because it came out a few years ago and it listed as the capital of Florida, the city of Jacksonville. That gave me a lot of pause for thought all along the way, but I'm sure that encyclopedia is still around. The project was initially conceived by Dr. Ray Betts of the University of Kentucky, George Street Boone of Elkton, and Mary Bingham. Mrs. Bingham generously put up $150,000, and that was enough to get a good start. One member of the commission was Dr. Thomas D. Clark, Kentucky's historian laureate. He was sold on the idea of the encyclopedia and became a one-man army devoted to getting the project started and seeing it through to completion. He was my greatest ally and my dearest friend. In the winter of 1988, Dr. Clark called and offered me the position of editor-in-chief. I would have been unable to accept the offer except for the understanding and cooperation of the administration of Morehead State University. The university supported the project by granting me a 3-year leave of absence while enabling me to be paid by the commission through the university. Backed by this support, I removed to Lexington and began work there on July the 1st, 1988. Dr. Clark had arranged for the project to be housed in the Special Collections section of the Margaret I. King Library at the University of Kentucky. It was the perfect location due to the resources of the library, the expertise of the University of Kentucky faculty, the availability of graduate students, particularly graduate assistants, and the proximity to the University Press of Kentucky, which would be our publisher. I was given 36 months to compile a massive research tool. Nothing of this sort had been done since Lewis Collins published his historical sketches of Kentucky in 1874. In Kentucky, the heavy reliance upon oral tradition, the dispersal of research institutions, and the sparsity of documents, balanced by the accumulation of conflicting data, made my investigations difficult. I remember sitting at my desk on the first day and asking myself, where do I begin? If I had known then all of the problems that lay ahead, I would, and I sincerely mean this, I would have backed out. Ignorance is bliss. Indeed, it was 2 years into the project before I was convinced that the resources would be forthcoming to complete the work. Funding was a constant worry, and it was exacerbated by the fact that there was an internal struggle within the commission on whether the money should come from private or state funds. In the end, with a combination of these funding sources and particularly a grant of $100,000 from the J. Graham Brown Foundation, we got the job done. That grant will permit the encyclopedia to sell for a modest $35 and enable it to be put on computer disk for library use. On June the 30th of 1991, I delivered a manuscript to the press. It will be published on June 1st, this year, Statehood Day, when the first copy will be presented to Governor Brereton Jones. The place where I began the project was to identify entry titles. In the end, we included 2,200 of them. They varied in length from 100 words to 2,500 words, and they fell into 4 areas: people, places, things, and events. Most of our entries were biographical sketches, and I made an arbitrary decision in the beginning to include living people, which was always more of a problem since the information is not as readily available. If you think it's easy to find out the age of Loretta Lynn, then you better think again. She keeps that well hidden. But even worse than Loretta Lynn was Tom T. Hall. We had to dig deep, deep down, John Duncan knows this, to find old Tom T. Hall's age. I guess our greatest nightmare, however, was with a man from Morehead we put in the encyclopedia, Steve Hamilton. We finally decided he is anywhere from 65 to 72. And we decided to go with 72, so you will see that. Well, to help me select these entries, I identified 28 consulting editors. These people were asked to suggest not only entry titles, but also to suggest potential authors, and then to read the finished entries in their field. The 28 different categories of information to be found in the Kentucky Encyclopedia include art, architecture, blacks, coal, communications, counties, and towns. And by the way, we put in every town in Kentucky that had more than 2,500 people, and in Kentucky, that's not many. Economics, education, flora and fauna, folk life, geography, geology, government, law, literature, medicine, military, politics. For politics, we had to have 4 editors. And I'm not sure that was enough. Poetry, recreation, religion, science, sports, transportation, rural, urban, and women. The These separate categories of women and blacks reflects my determination to document the contributions of those people. I was not greatly successful, and only about 15% of our biographical sketches are of these kind. The preponderance of white males in the entries reflects a traditional social system that has provided fewer opportunities of leadership to others and has failed to record many of their contributions. The Kentucky Encyclopedia represents a Kentucky as it has been rather than as it should have been. Indeed, as the encyclopedia took shape, it seemed to bespeak the nature of the Commonwealth itself. Our more than 500 authors, possessed of diverse educational backgrounds and social and cultural experiences, represented every region. The sum of their contributions reflects the voice of Kentucky, its strengths and weaknesses at the end of 200 years of statehood. I sincerely hope that the woman who undertakes the compilation of an encyclopedia for the tricentennial celebration will not have to make such an apology. Good, I caught that. In the end, I was much better satisfied that the encyclopedia reflected a regional balance. As a native of Louisville, I can say that Kentucky's most provincial people are to be found in that city. Thank God I got to Morehead to learn and know something outside of Louisville. In Louisville, nothing exists east of the Oxmoor Shopping Center or west of Shively, and that is the truth. I was determined that the encyclopedia would include more than the contributions of the River City and the Bluegrass region. So I made trips to far eastern and far western Kentucky and to northern Kentucky. I visited 40 counties, and at each stop I inquired about events and people there that needed to be included. Sometimes the suggestions were excellent, but just as often they were very strange. I found that it is a trait of Kentuckians that everyone has some ancestor whose contribution to the development of this state was so great that no encyclopedia would be complete without including him or her. Sometimes these people pursued me down to Lexington. And how many times did I hear stories like this? This is one example. Uncle Richard was Belle Breezing's best customer. If you don't know Belle Breezing, she ran a house of prostitution in Lexington. She made the encyclopedia. One of the problems I had with Belle Breezing is where to put her in these 28 categories. So I put her in recreation. Our consulting editor was Mimi Lewis, who happens to be the daughter of Happy Chandler. When she got that, she called me up, said, "What am I doing with Belle Breezing?" I said, "I thought she was dead." But she said, "What's she doing here in my category?" I said, "Well, can you think of a better place?" We left her into recreation. Well, the stories I heard around the state raised the issue of the truth of factual information. And to the end of my work, I was more concerned about accuracy than any other factor. One example will suffice. This man we put in the encyclopedia, I dare say nobody in this auditorium remembers him today. He was John Stuart Williams. At one time, every Kentuckian knew him. He was born in Montgomery County. He graduated from Miami University in either 1837 or 1839. We found both dates. I called. He graduated in 1838. He was a lawyer. He was in the Mexican War and fought at the Battle of Cerro Gordo. He was so brave, in fact, there they called him Cerro Gordo Williams. What made him important for the encyclopedia is not that he ran for governor of Kentucky and lost, because everybody does that before he or she dies, but that he was a United States Senator. And he served in the United States Senate from 1879 to 1885. Now, when we investigated this man, we found that he was born on July the 10th of 1818. Fine. A week later, one of my researchers came to me and said, "Dr. Kleber, we have found a second birth date for John Stuart Williams, July 19th, 1818. One day different." I said, "Well, we obviously have got to determine which birth date we had. I don't believe he was born on both days." So we did some looking around, and we found out about a week after that, to our amazement, that we had documented a third birth date for John Stuart Williams, July the 18th of 1820. We now had him born 2 years later. 3 documented birth dates. I could not find it anywhere else, and then came across the fact he was buried in the Winchester Cemetery. I called the Winchester Cemetery and I said, would you do me a favor, please check your records or go out into the cemetery and find out what date is carved on the tombstone of John Stuart Williams. 2 days later, I got a call, and the man said, Dr. Kleber, are you sitting down? I sat down. He said, we now have a 4th birth date for John Stuart Williams, June the 29th of 1818. What did I do? I tossed a coin and went with the tombstone birth date. Is that one correct? I have no idea. But that was the kind of thing we faced constantly. Factual error will more quickly destroy the integrity of an encyclopedia than any other single factor. For this reason, checks for accuracy were built into our procedure. Every entry was read by myself, by the 3 associate editors, the appropriate consulting editor, as well as by at least 2 other members of the staff. Hundreds of facts were checked and many mistakes were corrected. But in general, we were forced to rely on the integrity of the authors and the reliability of their sources. And the latter is a dangerous thing to rely upon in Kentucky. One gratifying aspect of the process was the enthusiasm with which the 540 authors responded. They were on time with their entries and in most cases accepted our editorial changes. Only one person out of the 540 forbade us to use his name with his entry. 15 of the authors have Morehead State University connections, and they provided me with some of the very best entries in this encyclopedia. I think many of those might be here today. I'd like to point those people out to you in the audience, and as I mention their name, if they'd stand, I'd like you to see who they are and what they contributed to this encyclopedia. William Booth wrote on Frank Duveneck. Robert Byland on the Mormon Church in Kentucky. John Collis, a sketch of Steve Hamilton. Charles Crail on the Daniel Boone National Forest. Hubert Crawford on Carter County. Bernard Davis on banking in Kentucky, Adrian Dorn on the Church of Christ in Kentucky, John R. Duncan on Morehead State University and Tom T. Hall, William Green on the Constitutions of Kentucky and the Statehood Conventions, Dennis Karwatka on industrial education in the state, Arthur Kelly on Kentucky and the Korean War, Clara Keyes, The Life of Allie Young, John Philly on the fire clay industry, Stuart Sprague on Kentucky of the Civil War, and Mott Whitson wrote on Barton W. Stone. Would you recognize these people for the great contributions they made? Thank you. Well, the work of all these people, and not mine alone, explains the completion of the Kentucky Encyclopedia on time and under budget. The encyclopedia is a gift Kentuckians have prepared and given to themselves. And what do I hope the gift will accomplish when it is published in June? Well, first, I hope it will bring back much that is now hidden from sight, such as John Stuart Williams. Second, I hope that it will create a new interest in those topics and will stimulate new research. Third, I hope that it will provide easy access to factual material. I think the encyclopedia will be of great help to teachers and students, journalists, politicians, librarians, and above all, to the lovers of trivial pursuit. Fourth, I hope that the encyclopedia will lay to rest, to some degree, the great man theory, and will show the contributions of some women and minorities who have been overlooked. I hope the encyclopedia, fifth, will emphasize regional contributions. Sixth, and this is extremely important, I hope it will set right the errors, myths, romantic notions that have hampered our progress and plagued our scholarship. One of my great finds was to engage a man named Joe Nickel of Morgan County to work for me, a former Pinkerton detective. I put him to work on some of the myths of Kentucky history. He wrote on the Swift Silver Mine. If you think that exists, I want to sell you some land I have. He wrote on Daniel Boone, who is the true Daniel Boone, and he wrote on what I thought was the most fascinating topic of all: what did Jesse James really do in Kentucky? You'll have to read the encyclopedia to find out. Finally, I hope that the encyclopedia will help us extol ourselves and provide the citizens of the Commonwealth a sense of who they are, where they are, and from where they came. Kentuckians have given the world bourbon whiskey and pari-mutuel betting. pioneered in steelmaking and steamboating, and invented the traffic light. The Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Fried Chicken are famous from London to Tokyo. The state that contains the natural wonder of the Mammoth Cave need feel in no way inferior. Like Columbus and the Buttons, I take a sense of pride in the fact that together with many others, and many here, I have left something of permanence. Like Columbus and the Buttons, I made certain discoveries. And the greatest of these is that our strength lies in our wonderful and diverse people. And that is why I repeat that 1992 should be a celebration of both place and people. The Bicentennial Commission and Morehead State University gave me a unique opportunity to open doors and meet fascinating people whom I will never forget. I recall very well Lon Carter Barton of Mayfield, a former state representative who on a cold February afternoon in a small coffee shop told me many stories of the lives of the people of Graves County. I remember Clay Lancaster of Salvisa, an authority on bluegrass architecture whose early 19th century home is filled with priceless Oriental antiques. And he served me tea in a small tea house beside his old and magnificent home. George and Joy Boone of Elkton, a lineal descendant of Daniel who offered me sherry out of a silver cup served on a silver tray and whose bedroom contained 2 Steinway grand pianos. George took pride in the fact that Elkton is the only county seat with no traffic light. Rena Milligan of Russellville, the epitome of Logan County aristocracy. This woman was unbelievable. About 70 years old, beautifully dressed, immaculate in every way. She looked me in the eye and she wanted me desperately to know that she was a direct descendant of Jesse James. I was horrified. John Robertson of Paducah, who wanted more than anything else when I got to Paducah to show me Speedy, the mummified body of a man kept in a local mortuary. And they bring him out to show him to school classes. And he begged me to put Speedy in the encyclopedia. But we didn't. Doris Wilkinson of Lexington. She was in the first integrated class at the University of Kentucky. And she now holds a PhD in sociology and teaches at that institution. George Yater and Robert Schulman of Louisville retired from the Courier Journal, and over many lunches, they revealed the deep, dark secrets of that great newspaper. Or Herman Landau, who wrote on the Jewish community of Louisville, and with a tear in his eye, he told me how Mr. Barry Bingham loaned him the money for his wife to have an operation. Harry Caudill. This one I have the most difficulty talking about. I was so fortunate that shortly before his tragic death, Harry Caudill invited me to his home in Whitesburg. We sat there on a beautiful, beautiful winter afternoon looking across at the Pine Mountain. While I sat there, Harry Caudill told me the most unbelievable stories I have ever heard. I loved every one of them, even though they weren't true. And he looked me in the eye and he said, "You know, John, if the mountains had only been settled by more Germans, we would have had fewer problems." Thank goodness Harry Caudill wrote his last articles for the Kentucky Encyclopedia. On June 1st, you were all invited to the biggest birthday party the state has ever seen. And I hope that many of you will go to Frankfort on that day, enjoy the parade and the fireworks, and maybe even buy an encyclopedia. Go to celebrate this place we call home. But most of all, go to celebrate yourself. Because what I discovered in 3 years was that you are indeed the uncommon wealth of Kentucky. Thank you very much.
John, if you will return to the podium. Not only as a way of expressing our appreciation for that marvelous presentation on Founders Day, but to say thanks to you for all that you've done at the university as editor of the encyclopedia. We present to you this painting, which we hope you will proudly display at home or in your office. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
The Founders Day Committee has done an extraordinarily fine job of planning the events of the day, and they need to be recognized. Their names are printed in the program, and those of them that are here, I would like for them to stand and be greeted by you and thanked by you. Would you please stand? Founders Day Committee. May I remind you of the other events of the day. The noon luncheon follows just shortly in the Krager Room. At 2 p.m. we will have a ribbon-cutting ceremony for the renaming of the Red Room, which has been recently renovated. And of course, this evening we conclude with the annual Alumni Awards Dinner at 7 p.m. also in the Krager Room. Thank you so much for coming and your kind attention. We adjourned.
Good job. Good job.
Mary can't get by. Mary, you act like a grandmother here carrying that purse around. Can't get rid of it.
I'm like, who is that on the Golden Girl?